I'm Dick Tiller, and I'll be having something to say about Danny soon, but we're going to start with our acting commissioner, Bill Wyatrowski. Probably wait until I talk before you decide whether you want to clap or not. Can everybody hear me? Folks way over in the corner? Okay. I guess the notes should be right side up. So I had all these Bob Parker jokes, but it's not here for me to tell my Bob Parker jokes. So I'll go ahead. Maybe he'll come in before I finish. Good morning, everyone. I want to welcome you to the Bureau of Labor Statistics. It's nice to see such a large crowd here to honor Dr. Danny Pfeffermann. I see a bunch of familiar faces, including some BLS alums, so welcome back. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Bill Wyatrowski. I'm the Deputy Commissioner, and for the last 21 months, I've been the Acting Commissioner. Yes, I'm still here. So I walked into this place, well, not physically this place, it was down the street about 38 years ago, and I never thought that I would end up in the commissioner's office unless I did something really bad. And I never took any acting lessons, and so this is all sort of new to me, but I do sort of live and learn. So BLS is known for producing gold standard data to help Americans make good decisions. We produce that all the time. Last Friday we produced important employment data. A few weeks ago we put out the Consumer Price Index for September, which was used by the Social Security Administration to adjust Social Security payments for January. I always know that because my mom always calls me the day the CBI comes out, usually to complain about it. There's Bob Parker. Now I can tell my Bob Parker jokes. We pride ourselves on producing gold standard data for Americans to make good decisions. And so much of that is national data, but we also serve a broader set of stakeholders by producing a lot of local data. So I see news clips almost every day that focus on employment, unemployment, consumer prices, wages, and other information for states, metropolitan areas, and smaller locales around the country. Some of the only local data available is from the Bureau of Labor Statistics. And local data users are an important constituency for us, and ones that we serve, and we hope to serve them, continue to serve them well. So my charge to all of you today is to become more familiar with the rich amount of local data that we have here at BLS. So when I was asked to give some remarks, I tapped into some of my friends here at BLS to learn a little bit about our local area unemployment data, and I've got some good information. So a little history lesson. I see people here that know this stuff better than me. So if I get it a little wrong, just be patient. So the Department of Labor has been producing local labor estimates since the 1950s. Until the 1970s, these came from a place called the Bureau of Economic Security, or BES, which later became our current sister agency, the Employment and Training Administration. BES issued guidelines that states used to develop their own unemployment estimates. In 1962, I was 4, I think, the President's Committee to Appraise Employment and Unemployment Statistics, known as the Gordon Committee, criticized the validity of these local estimates. And this was followed by a series of independent studies comparing these estimates to those from the census and from the current population survey. And ultimately, it was decided, the General Accounting Office put out a report, said that the information, these data should be generated through the Bureau of Labor Statistics. And ultimately, the Office of Management and Budget moved the responsibility in November of 1972, which started the BLS Local Area Unemployment Statistics Program, affectionately known as LAUS. And so apparently those people who left the LAUS program went through a delousing ceremony. So you can thank Mr. Carey for that joke. While the monthly national employment data and other national labor force data come from the CPS, the CPS size is not large enough to generate state and sub-state levels. So in response to this limitation, LAUS has developed a series developed time series models and other estimation techniques throughout the years, blending both survey and administrative data. and Dr. Danny Pfeffermann has been instrumental in helping to develop these models. The LAOS program provides timely information on labor force and unemployment trends for about 7,000 areas, including states, metropolitan and micropolitan areas, all counties, and select cities. And in fact, these data are used by a wide variety of folks. One of the largest users is the Secretary of Labor, and in fact, I just came from a meeting where the Secretary mentioned that he's making a quick trip to Indiana this week, unexpectedly. So, folks, if you need to leave the room to go get some Indiana data, that's fine. So, LAOS estimates serve as economic indicators and are a major source of information for labor market research, analysis, and planning. In addition to economic analysis, another important use of LAOS data is the allocation of federal funds to state and local jurisdictions covered by 25 assistance programs across 9 departments and independent agencies in areas such as employment, training, public works, and welfare assistance. So until a few minutes ago, I never had the pleasure of meeting Dr. Danny Pfeffermann, but his reputation is legendary around BLS and around the LAOS program. So when Bob Parker called and asked me to say a few words at this event, how could I refuse? Of course, Bob is pretty relentless, so it's hard to refuse him, period. But in this case, it really is a pleasure. So with special thanks to Dick Tiller and Patrick Carey, I was able to learn even more about what Danny has done for the BLS and for the program. Danny's first contact with BLS dates back to 1976, when he was awarded a UN fellowship that provided a monetary grant with the ambitious objective to tour the world to gather information and exchange experiences that would help solve practical economic and social development problems. Now, I've never been awarded such a thing, but that sounds like a great opportunity. So among the sites Danny chose was to visit BLS in Washington. And he actually met with Julius Shiskin, who was commissioner of BLS and widely known as the father of the X11 seasonal adjustment program. Like Julius, Danny would conduct important research in seasonal adjustment and become director of a government statistical agency. Danny's been a consultant with BLS since 1997. He's among the top researchers in areas of special importance to BLS: analysis of complex survey data, small area estimation, time series, and seasonal adjustment. He's made important contributions to labor force estimates in the LAOS program and conducted important research on variances for seasonal adjustment with X11. His contributions have been essential to the development of the third and the current fourth generation of the LAOS model, particularly with respect to real-time benchmarking. Currently, Danny is working on improvements to sub-state estimation, which is the subject of his presentation. So I want to extend my congratulations to Dr. Danny Pfeffermann on receipt of the Julius Shiskin Award, and I want to welcome all of you to BLS. Thank you.
Good morning. I guess I'm the late Robert Parker. Traffic is not moving too well. Oh, okay. Sorry. So I want to thank Bill and the other BLS staff and LUSS members of BLS. I'd especially like to thank Tom Evans for this seminar. I'm chair of the selection committee for the Julius Shiskin Award, and I will talk briefly about the award and its latest recipient, Professor Danny Pfeffermann, who I have not met yet, but that's okay. That's what happens when you're late. So the Shiskin Award is sponsored by the Washington Statistical Society, National Association for Business Economics, and the Business and Economics section of the ASA. Committees consist of representatives of the sponsors, several federal agencies, Committee on National Statistics, and National Bureau of Economic Research. Tom Evans is the secretary for the committee. Notes, I'll probably do a lot better. The award has been given annually since 1980 to recognize unusually original and important contributions in the field of economic statistics. As you entered the Janet Norwood Conference Center, you might have noted Shiskin's picture on the wall. He was commissioner when he passed away in 1978, having served earlier at the Office of Management Budget, and at the Census Bureau. So Julie was an innovator during his career. As Bill noted, he was instrumental in designing the most widely used computerized method for seasonal adjustment. That research and some others led to the groundwork for the calculation of the monthly economic indicators. They originally were published by the Census Bureau and then by the Bureau of Economic Analysis, and then was sold to the Conference Board. For those of you who know, the Conference Board is a nonprofit research organization headquartered in New York. So the monthly estimates now come from the Conference Board. He also had a number of other important contributions, one of which is Statistical Policy Directive 3, which is well known to anybody who puts out key economic indicators and has to get the information to other people in the government. Professor Pfeffermann shares the 2018 award with Dr. Barry Bosworth of the Brookings Institution. Bosworth is recognized for conducting research on a wide number of economic issues, but he did most of his research working with federal statistics and then working with agencies to improve these programs. As the slide said, Professor Danny Pfeffermann is the National Statistician and Director General of the Census Bureau of Statistics of Israel, position he's had, I think, since 2013. He's also Professor of Social Statistics at the University of Southampton and Professor Emeritus of Statistics at the Hebrew University of Jerusalem since 2010. Professor Pfeffermann has been selected to receive the Shiskin Award in recognition of his outstanding contributions to survey sampling theory and practice and time series analysis, particularly for his fundamental work on the analysis of complex survey data in the presence of information sampling, small area estimation, and time series analysis. I think that's probably all I'm going to say about Professor Pfeffermann's contributions. I think the folks at BLS are well aware of what he's done, particularly in the small area estimation area. So without further reciting his accomplishments, it gives me great pleasure to meet Professor Pfeffermann at this particular moment, because that way I can finally present the honorarium which goes with this award. So, this is your honorarium. Thank you for coming all this distance. I know you are doing many things across the pond, but we're certainly glad you were able to come here and give this address. So I'm looking forward to hearing it, the title of which is on the board, so I won't have to read it. So thank you. I think, oops, one more person that's going to talk about it. Tiller, I believe? Yes. Okay. Thank you.
Good morning. Danny and I have worked together at BLS for over 20 years, and I, along with all the others that I know who have also worked with him, have been impressed not only with his novel approaches to solving statistical problems, but also for the incredible energy and enthusiasm he brings to the table. And speaking of his energy, I have a personal remembrance I'd like to share with you this morning that dates back about 16 years. The late summer of 2002, Danny and I were in Amsterdam attending a conference in honor of James Durbin. The conference, oddly enough, started on a Thursday and proceeded through the weekend the following Tuesday, but fortunately with a break on Sunday. On that Sunday, we rented bikes. Our plan was to ride north to the IJsselmeer, the biggest lake in the Netherlands, about 50 miles from the city. I wasn't much of a bicyclist, but at that time I was in top physical shape, running 25 to 30 miles a week, a 10-mile run every Sunday. This was Sunday, perfect weather for biking, and I was ready to go. And I started out with the lead, but I didn't want to set too fast a pace for Danny. He plays tennis, but that's not nearly as good as running. But I was disabused of that thought very quickly when he zipped past me like I was standing still. This had the makings of a very stimulating ride, I was thinking. But on our way north, fortunately, we stopped at a number of points of interest and had lunch, and it wasn't so bad. Finally, we came to the northern shore of the IJsselmeer. We took a short break. We were a little behind schedule. And then we proceeded back south, taking a different, more scenic route, riding along the top of the dike. To our left was the lake, and to our right, lower down, was the beautiful Dutch countryside with a wooden windmills along the way. And as beautiful as this view was, I had to focus on the immediate task of keeping up with Danny, who was now increasing the pace so that we would get back before dark. I was still feeling okay, and I was finding it easier and easier to keep up with Danny, like I was getting my second wind. And finally, I even took the lead. I was thinking, oh, I can match his energy level after all. After a while, I sensed he was slowing down. I looked back, and he was visibly struggling, and then he stopped. And I turned back thinking maybe he needed a rest, but that wasn't the case. No, his bike had a flat tire. He quickly pumped it up. It was a slow leak. And then, with full power restored, he took the lead. And at this point, my strategy was to draft behind him to preserve as much energy as I could so I could make it to the bitter end. And by the time we reached the city, it was nearly dark. We had covered about 100 miles, I think. And I was finished for the day. And unfortunately, the next morning I had to get up early and prepare for an hour-and-a-half presentation for one of the conference's workshops. As for Danny, you might think he would have slowed down by now after 16 years, but just the opposite. He's now the chief statistician and director of all things statistical in the Israeli government, and also maintains his academic commitments. But fortunately for us at BLS, he is still willing to continue with his consulting. We're always happy to see him, and it's my pleasure to welcome Danny back to BLS to give his award talk.
I think by now you saw all the slides, so. Thank you all very much. It's really exciting. I'm overwhelmed. I didn't remember I had a flat tire that day, but your memory is probably better than mine. So let me thank first of all the selection committee for selecting me for this year. You didn't consult with me whom to select, but I think you reached a good decision. And thanks to whoever organized this seminar here. Tom, where is Tom? I know he was very active, but probably there were others, so thanks everyone. This is joint paper with Dr. Dick Tiller and Dr. Mikhail Sverchkov, who stands there. And also, I should mention Jennifer Ho and Lizzie Leon. I hope I pronounce your names correctly, who are helping us a lot with the computations. I should say that this is an applied paper trying to address a very important problem.
something you would call still at work. It's so much at work that until about an hour ago, we were still working on some of the slides. And I'll mention a few things that, there are many things that still have to be done, but I'll mention a few of them. Okay, so here is the outline of my talk. I'll talk about the objective, the BLS labor force estimates, calibrating local area estimates to ACS. I should say that I originally we called it calibrating, then I changed everything to benchmarking because I don't think we do calibration, at least not in the way it's known, but for some reason it didn't change on this slide. Issues with ACS data, modeling ACS, annual ACS data, synthetic estimators. I mean, you'll see everything what I mean. What is very important, I'll show an example with real data, and then a brief summary. So, here is the objective. We want to reduce the bias of the monthly local area unemployment and employment estimates by combining data from the American Community Survey, the ACS, administrative data, and data from the current population survey. So if you like, this is a small area problem. If you like, it's something like how to integrate data from different surveys. Sort of it combines the two. Historically, the BLS estimation of the sub-state level was based on area-specific administrative data, except for the decimal census long form data. There are no direct labor force survey data at the county level. So when I talk about sub-areas, it's mostly counties, but not always. Since 2005, the ACS has become a unique source of direct annual labor force estimates for sub-state areas. And it's actually the largest, timely, and most geographically detailed household survey in the US, covering 3,141 counties. So what we actually have, and you'll see it in more detail, we have monthly state estimates, we have annual local area estimates. What we want to produce is monthly local area estimates. So, just a few words. You probably know more than me about the CPS. It's a nationwide household survey of the labor force characteristics of the civilian, non-institutional population, 16 plus years of age. What is quite unique, the CPS, although I should say we have now the same sampling design in Israel and I think also in Brazil, is this 484 rotating panel design by which households are interviewed for 4 successive months. They are out of the sample for the next 8 months, but then they are interviewed again for 4 additional months. This generates high correlation between successive months, I think 75% overlap, and between the same month in 2 years, which is, I think, it's a 15% overlap. So for large national samples, the direct survey estimates are used as the official estimates. In other words, the national estimates from the survey are sufficiently accurate. However, their samples are not sufficiently large even at the state level. So in this respect, I think California is a small area. And when it comes to sub-states, of course, then actually you hardly have any sample. And you cannot use any direct sample estimates. And this, by the way, I mentioned already, this in a way is quite unique. So people that are working in small area estimation, you usually have a direct estimate from a sample. Here we don't have it. To meet national and state reliability criteria, about sample size is about 60,000 housing units, which are drawn from 800 CPS sample areas. Here I just listed what are those reliability criterion. You want to have at most a 1.9% CV for national monthly estimates of unemployment. If the true unemployment rate or an unemployment rate of 6%, there is also a similar reliability criteria at the state level. But as I said before, the direct survey estimate, those are the estimates that you just produce from the current population survey, are not sufficiently accurate even at the state level, and even at the big state level. So here is where I actually worked with people from the BLS for many years now, is to model those direct, call it, estimates that we get from the current population survey to reduce sampling variability, or in simple words, to make it more accurate. So what we did is to feed time series models independently for each state. And those models actually consist of two components, and if you, I'm sure, are familiar with them by now. There is a model for the signal, which is the sum of a stochastic trend, seasonal effects, and irregular variations. And then there is a model also for the CPS sampling error. And I remind you, because of this rotation pattern, they are highly correlated from one month to the other. So the covariance matrix between those sampling errors is actually estimated externally from the individual responses. And there is the issue that we want to robustify those estimators against sudden shocks. And what happened in September 11 is an example of such a shock. So the state models are actually combined into a multivariate model with monthly constraints that actually cause that the sum of the state signal estimates equals the CPS direct estimate for the entire nation. So every month we run those models, but we make sure that the sum of those state estimates will equal what we get for the national estimate, and this is all embedded within the model, get the right variances, etc. And it's in a paper that mentioned here. So what about those substates estimates, which is what we are really interested in today? So each state is actually partitioned into substates, and there are over than 4,000 substate areas in the 50 states and DC, for which monthly labor force estimates are sought. And there are no monthly survey estimates available for most of these areas because of sample size is just not sufficiently large, of course, cost and everything. So in the absence of direct monthly survey estimates, the BLS has what is known as the handbook estimates that combine information from administrative census records and some limited amount of national survey estimates. And those estimates, as far as I understand it, have been developed already in the 1960s. It's sort of based on implicit models, but there's no formal statistical model building behind those estimates. And this model, I put it in quotes because, as I said, it's not really a statistical model, uses local employment insurance, unemployment insurance claims, and payroll employment data, along with estimates of various categories of employment and unemployment in wider areas that you get from national and state CPS data. To ensure consistency with the state model-based estimates, those sub-state estimates, those handbook estimates, are ratio adjusted each month to the corresponding model-based state estimate that I mentioned before. This monthly benchmarking is effective in reducing an overall bias in those HB method, but it doesn't really use any local information. So here I come to what I'm actually going to present now after this long introduction. So we'll discuss now how to incorporate annual local area ACS, American Community Survey data estimates, to improve those monthly local area estimates. Did I confuse you enough by now? So, slide 2 on the ACS survey. As I think I already mentioned, it's the largest, timely, most geographic detailed household survey in the US. It collects data on labor force status and other socioeconomic, demographic, and housing characteristics from 4,757 counties or county equivalents, with an overall sampling fraction of 2.5%. So it's a very big survey. And its standard full implementation began in 2005. 3.5 million addresses each year, with each address sampled for 1 month of 1 year. And it's not considered again. So unlike the CPS, every address is in the sample for 1 month and that's it. Until it's considered for sampling again 5 years later. Annual estimates are available for areas with population of larger than 20,000. Remember, only annual estimates. 5-year moving period estimates are available for smaller areas. So for the smaller areas, you no longer have annual estimates, only moving 5-year estimates. Those annual series are available 9 months after collection. This is important. I'll get back to here. 5-year series are only available after 12 months. If this hasn't changed, then this is. So, here is basically what we want to do. We want to use the ACS as annual controls for area-specific loss estimates. I remind you, the loss estimates are the HB, the handbook estimates, which are benchmarked to the monthly state estimates. And now we want also to benchmark to the loss estimates. So to reduce the bias in the Laos handbook estimates, we propose adding the ACS estimates as a second layer of benchmarking constraint. Benchmark sub-state monthly Laos estimate within each state, so using 2 types of constraints. It's a 2-way constraints. Monthly CPS model-based state estimates, annual ACS estimates. But as I will mention in a few moments, we also model the ACS, the annual ACS estimates. So basically we benchmark to the model-based CPS estimates and model-based ACS estimates. So here is the general idea, actually very simple in a way. Those of you familiar with raking or with calibration, I have areas. Now here are my areas, count C areas altogether. Here are the months, 12 months, and here are, so the ACS provides me totals for every area over the months. So this is what I see.
Hey Danny, use the keypad so the people remote can see where you're pointing to.
Sorry, say it again.
Use the touchpad to point, and then the people on the web can see where you're pointing. If that works.
I'm not sure I follow you.
Ignore me.
On the screen?
Yeah, well, don't worry. Is there a touchpad on the computer? I don't know.
Yes, there is.
There. Yeah.
Ah, you don't like this.
Well, the people remote can't see the thing.
Okay. So here take area number 1. I get only monthly totals for that area. So these are the ACS totals that I see. I'm assuming right now 1 year totals. And here is month 1, say, I see the CPS totals or the model-based CPS totals. And what I want to do is to fill in those estimates here. So what are my benchmark constraints? On the one hand, I wanted the sum over all, I wanted the sum over all the areas of my estimates in any given month will equal the CPS total. But I also wanted the sum over all the months. So here it was sum over all the areas. Here I wanted the sum over all the months of any given area. Doing it all wrong. The sum over all the areas over all the months of the given area will equal the ACS total. So how do we do it? We basically use a similar techniques. It was developed by DeVille and Serndal for calibration. So if I denote by NCM the true unknown count in area C at month N, and by DCM the corresponding loss estimates or the handbook estimates, or I'll show you in a few minutes another way to get estimates. So what is this benchmarking? Find new estimate, which we denoted by WCM, that are as close as possible to the loss estimates or any other initial estimates, subject to satisfying the constraint, which I just said before, the sum of the monthly estimates, sum of over all the areas in a given month will equal the CPS estimator. The sum over all the months in any given area will equal the ACS estimator. What do we mean by as close as possible? We want to minimize the relative difference between the new estimator that we are looking at and the, say, the HB or Laos or whichever estimates we start with. The use of this particular distance function, which is this one here, provides explicit expressions for those new estimators, which is important because one of the things we still have to work on, I'll mention it in my last slide, is how to estimate the variances of our estimators. But one can use other distances with no longer explicit expression or not necessarily explicit expressions, replace the square by an absolute difference or whatever. I mentioned before 5 years total for the small areas. Here I'll really only restrict to 1 year data, but we also have those small areas. Very similar idea. Now I have denoted by NCYM, I try to use the letters that they will be informative, the true unknown count for area C in month M of year Y. And by DCYM, the corresponding, say, Laos estimates. Again, should be benchmarking, not calibration, I'm sorry. Find new estimates, WCYM, that are as close as possible to the Laos estimates, and now they satisfy the following constraints. Again, the sum over all the areas will give me the this is the the CPS sum for year Y and month N. Remember, I have a CPS total for every year and every month. The sum over over 5 years of over all the months of those estimates will give me this ACS total for county C over the 5 years. So basically this is the information I have. I still have my monthly estimates for the CPS, but I only have 5 years totals for my ACS. So basically I make sure to benchmark to the monthly CPS estimate to the 5 year totals of the ACS estimate. And again, there is a solution. We use a similar loss function and we can get our solution, and it's actually described if someone is interested in more detail in this article by Sverchkov and Tiller. We could combine, and we actually did it, large and small areas in a single calibration, but we still need to work on it. So as I said, now I will mostly restrict on 1 year data. So what are the properties of those proposed benchmarking with the ACS totals and the CPS monthly totals? As I mentioned already, we have closed form solution. calibration in any given year is independent of other years. So we can actually benchmark each year separately, and this is an advantage in terms of computing, etc. But this is no longer true if we consider moving 5-year totals. Possible problems. We may produce breaks in the series when large year-to-year changes occur. And in a minute I'll show you how we handle those. And it may even yield negative estimates. I don't think we ever had it, but possibly it can happen. So how do we deal with those year-to-year breaks? There's a famous, some of you may be familiar, known as the Denton's method. You can see it goes back to 1974. And it's exactly the idea. Eliminates breaks in benchmark series by minimizing the monthly differences in the size of the population adjustment. So in the size of the proportional adjustments to the input series. So you can see basically we change the loss function or the distance function. So now you don't just look at the differences between the W's, those are the new estimates, and the D, which are the input series, but you look at the relative differences. And subject again to, here it's, right now the Denton, it only works with subject to those ACS, if you want, constraints, that the monthly total should add up to the ACS total. And this we apply to the Lau series. Remember, the Lau series already we benchmarked the estimates to the CPS totals. So if you want, you do it in two ways. And this, by the way, already basically gives you the solution. Don't really need to do this two-way later on. So first you benchmark the handbook estimates to the monthly CPS estimates, or the sum in every month over all the areas should give you the CPS monthly total. And now you also, with this constraint here, you actually benchmark to the Laos totals, but now with a different function. And as I go down here, it tends to preserve relative movements in the Laos estimates. Okay, getting close now. Issues in relying on those direct SCS estimates. As I mentioned before, we actually model them. So while the employment and unemployment definitions in the ACS and the CPS are similar, there are actually differences in the estimates obtained from those two surveys, and you can compare them at a higher level of aggregation that are not just explained by something else. You could always say, those are two samples, so there's something else, but not. Here are some possible reasons for those differences. Mode of collection, it's known as mode effect. So at the ACS, you start with mail, then telephone, and then personal interview. Whereas at the CPS, it's actually more interesting. First and the fifth time that this person is interviewed, I remind you, 8 interviews altogether over a period of 16 months. So the first and the fifth one are personal interviews, all the others are by telephone. The reference week is different. At the ACS, you ask about the week prior to the survey, whereas at the CPS, it's the week that includes the 12th of the month. There are differences in response rates, and actually much higher in the CPS. Also, CPS has this 484 rotation scheme, which I just mentioned, with first and fifth time interviews carried out by copy, while household in the ACS are in the sample only once, and this can also affect. So these are all just possible explanations for those differences. So here is my first picture for today. Here is the unemployment rate that you get from the CPS and from the ACS, and you can see that the ACS is constantly higher than the CPS. With the employment, it's a bit more interesting because it started being lower for the ACS, but then later after 2010, it's higher again. And I was told that this happened because in 2010, the ACS changed their questionnaire. Is that correct?
2008.
2008. Okay. But here is something really interesting. If you look at the shares instead of the actual values, see that there is almost a 45% relationship, perfect relationship between the ACS shares and the CPS shares, both for unemployment and perfect for employment, but even for unemployment, it's fantastic. So it allows us to adjust the ACS estimates, and basically very simple ratio type or pro rata, whatever you want to call it. So basically what you do, don't have to worry about those. It reconciles the state CPS model estimates by requiring that the annual sum of the ACS area estimates equals the annual CPS state model estimates. Okay, so here is some issues about reliability, and the other issue is the ACS estimates. Even though the ACS sample is, as mentioned already, substantial, very big, there are still some major reliability problems. Large variations in area population size, hence also large variation in the sample sizes, and if you want large variation in the reliability of the estimates, which are obviously dependent on the sample size. And the reliability of the unemployment estimate is much less than the employment because most of the people, fortunately, are employed and not unemployed, so it's a much smaller fraction. And then there is a real-time estimation issue. As I mentioned before, the ACS estimates are released with a lag of 9 months. So when it comes to a current year, which is almost always the most important one, you have nothing to actually benchmark to. So here I just compared, if you want, the reliability of the CPS estimates versus the ACS. This is not a competition, this is just to show how it works. So you can see, so again, it's the monthly state CPS estimates compared to the annual ACS estimates, and you can see both with unemployment and disemployment, the CVs are much lower for the CPS than for the ACS. And here is just a standard error of the change in the monthly CPS and annual ACS. And again, you can see that the CPS is the more accurate one. So, I come to the next comment, and then I'll show you illustrations. We want to improve the estimates by modeling the annual adjusted ACS. I say adjusted ACS because remember we saw that what we mentioned before is this ratio adjustment to have the ACS and CPS at the same level. So improve the reliability of the annual ACS estimates by using data from two main sources. It's the unemployment insurance claims and what's known as the QCEW, quarterly census of earning and wages. It gives you actually an annual average of, you get a monthly information, but you can compute from that the annual average of the monthly counts of person on payroll. So the idea is to produce real time estimates during the current year when annual estimates will not be available. Because if I have a good model, I can actually use the model to predict what will be the current total of the ACS. it allows us to missing ACS data. There are some areas and some years where we have no data. I'll give an example in a minute. And you can also use this model or similar kind of model when you have those 5-year estimates to actually get from them annual estimates and then proceed the same way as we do or analyze the 1-year annual, the bigger data. So here is basically the model, and as always you can come up with other models. I don't think if we change the model it will change by much. So basically, again, we have our, remember, these are the YCT is the annual estimate, ACS estimate. So the estimate obviously has a sampling error. So small YCT is cap YCT, the true ACS value, plus the sampling errors. Again, C denotes areas, T now denotes years, because we talk about those annual estimates. We don't have ACS at a small area level. So cap YCT is the true ratio of employment or unemployment to work with ratio to the total population, 16 plus. Small y is the sample estimate, ECT is the sampling errors, and they are independent because remember the samples from one year to the other are actually independent, unlike the CPS. I will put known variances in quotes because in practice we get estimates, estimate those variances. No, so as in any sort of small area model, what you have to do next is to try and fit a model for those true sums, annual sums. So cap YCT has a constant intercept plus a random intercept. In the small area jargon we call those random effects, those small alpha C. And then we have an explanatory variable X, which is either the unemployment insurance count or this QCW insurance count. One case is for the unemployment, the other case is for employment. And again, you have a fixed coefficient plus a random. So both the intercept at the end of the day and the slope are allowed to be random. What I wrote here is very important because we're dealing with time series. So we tried to add to those models the time effect, but it was actually found to be redundant. It didn't help in any way, which is good in a way. It's good because it makes making the likelihood to get estimates of all those much simpler. And also when you have to impute missing data or if you want to predict, really makes life much easier. But as I said, we tried it and at least so far we didn't see that we need this extra time effect. So alpha and beta fixed parameters, and as I said, the alpha C and the beta C are variance components, or sorry, random intercept and slope, and for the likelihood purposes we assume these classical assumptions. So once we have this model, we can actually use the same model to produce monthly estimates. So basically use the annual model relationship for monthly estimates. How do we do it? We seasonally adjust those covariates that I mentioned before, and then we use the annual model parameters, estimates, to generate monthly estimates. Again, after converting levels, etc. So here is basically our model for how to generate the monthly data. So now you have CM, so it's for area C at month N, and basically you can see it's the same model. Now this may be confusing a bit because usually you have a model for the final level, and then from that you see what is the model for, say, the total. Here we go the other way around. We don't have, as I said, the small area data to begin with. We start from a model for the total, and from that model we basically extract what should be the model for each month. so that when we add up those monthly estimates from those models, it will be consistent with our model for the total. And we can use those estimates as alternatives to the handbook or the Laos estimates as initial estimates for our benchmark. And why would we do that? Mostly because it has this advantage that we get those monthly estimates. As I said, they're already consistent with the controls, and we don't have actually to wait for the ACS control, because from the annual model, we also get a predictor for what should be our annual estimate. But as I said, already consistent with this annual, so we don't really need to benchmark them to the annual ACS, only to the CPS. So as I said, it may be used to produce real-time predictors during current year before the availability of the ACS data. Can be benchmarked to the model-based predictor of the current year ACS control, and every month we have the CPS. So we can actually do this benchmarking every month, even at the current year. That's what is important. Okay, I think it's time to show some data, some real data, and how it works. Then we will sum it up. Dick chose Arizona. I'm not guilty. But there is actually, in the example I come to in a minute, there is something very unique about Arizona. So here we only have large areas, sub-areas. So they're all, as you can see, larger than 20,000. 15 sub-areas altogether. So 6 and 9, and what is known as the balance of state. In this case, we don't have it. It's the sum of all the small areas, but in this case, we don't have it. So we have data from 2005 to 2016, and here is what I mentioned before. There were 14 annual totals that were missing in all those series together, in all those 15 series. So we fitted our model, and here are basically the residuals from that model. Remember, those are estimated residuals. They are not perfectly normal, but remember, we are dealing with real data. These are not simulated data or anything like this. And here are some estimates. So as remember, we have fixed effects and we have variances of those estimated and we have the variances of the random effects, of the random intercept and slope. So you can see that basically everything is, as long as you believe in the model, everything seems to be significant and important. And just notice this variable, year 10. This is a dummy variable that we had to control, that we have to add to our model for controlling the introduction of a new population estimates for the ACS in 2010. So there was a sudden break in the ACS in 2010, and we controlled by adding this dummy variable to the model. Okay, so now I want to concentrate on one sub-area called Yuma, which is the most southern sub-area in Arizona, very close to the Mexican border. Okay, I've never been there. But from what I hear, there was considerable public questioning of the official estimates for Yuma, whether based on the handbook or the laws, because it showed something like a 30% unemployment rate, which is the highest in the nation. So I say this is an interesting example, even though actually the population has grown continuously by something like 20%. So you don't expect, if there is a county that is sort of very poor and very high of unemployment, to actually grow all the time, or the other way around. So as a border community, there are large flows of people from across the border, which raises the possibility that many of those unemployment insurance claimants actually may reside in Mexico or even in California, but they are counted as Yuma residents. And as we now show by benchmarking to the ACS annual estimates, we succeed in eliminating or at least reducing very significantly this apparent bias of the handbook or the Laos estimates. So here is the first very interesting picture. What is the green one? This is just the Laos estimates. You can see very high unemployment. Now the red is just, sorry, the blue is the ACS estimate, controls. So as long as you believe in the ACS estimates, you can see that the handbook, the Laos estimates are totally wrong. They are much, much higher. And what is the red? This is this smoothing, or this is the result of our modeling of the ACS annual totals. So you can see how nicely it works. Sorry for complimenting, but someone has to. And here, see what we get. These are basically the results that we get if we use the handbook. We start with the handbook as our initial estimates, and then we do the benchmarking. Or when we start with the Laos, and then remember, we can first apply, just to illustrate the importance of this Denton method, we can apply the Denton to the Laos, and then benchmark those Dentons. So again, we either start with the handbook, which is the green one, sorry, no, it's the gray one, or we can start with the Laos, which is the green one. Those are our initial estimates that we want to benchmark. No, sorry, those are before benchmarking. Now we can apply the Denton. And remember, the Denton, when it's applied to the Laos already benchmarks to the CPS. And now when you do the Denton, it basically benchmarks to the ACS. So you can see it already brings it down. And so you see the Denton Laos before benchmarking and after benchmarking. So those are these red and blue, and you cannot distinguish between the two. And that's the whole idea, that you shouldn't be able to distinguish between the two. So after you apply the Denton, and then basically you already get, so you do the Laos. Instead of doing everything in one step, you first benchmark to the monthly CPS estimates. This is the Laos, and then you do the Denton, which benchmarks to the monthly ACS estimates. Okay, and now here are basically 4 different sort of final estimates that you can get. I'm getting rid now of the handbook or the Laos before benchmarking, because as we saw, those are way too high. So now I have those benchmark Denton Laos, which I showed before, the synthetic model. Now the synthetic is what I start with, what I get from my model. Remember this, when I apply this total to each month separately. The Denton synthetic model, in other words, I get those estimates that I just get from my model before doing anything, but I apply the Denton method to it, and then I also benchmark it. And again, what you can see here is that the green, this is the benchmark. D Laos means Denton Laos is sort of much more variable, or maybe it's high, relatively high seasonal effects there, but it's hard to distinguish between those other 3 methods. Here is a nice table. The colors make it even nicer. How much did we change from the original data? So here are those 6 procedures that we considered. Basically, benchmark the handbook data, benchmark the handbook data after you apply this Denton procedure, benchmark the Laos, or benchmark the Laos after you apply the Denton method to the Laos, And when I wrote synthetic, it means the synthetic, those are what we get from our model. So you can see if you start just with the handbook, because of this two-way benchmarking, you change a lot for unemployment by 44 or 34%. And it's, by the way, the difference between this color and this color on same here is whether you use the original ACS estimates or whether you use the model-based ACS after we fit the model and we benchmark to those. And you can see already that by using the model, actually the change from the original data is always smaller. For example, with the synthetic estimate, it's much smaller. What is really amazing, look here, for employment, if you start with the synthetic. Again, what is the synthetic? My monthly estimates from my model. And then I apply the Denton method to them. And now I do the benchmarking. I basically doesn't change. I don't, the benchmarking already achieved it. I don't need to do the benchmarking. As I told you before, this Denton stuff already really makes all the job for us. And so you can see and consider the results. This is, by the way, this is again for all the states in all the sub areas in Arizona. Okay, I'm close to finish. Let me just go back to this current year estimation. The ACS data are available with a 1 year lag. Payroll employment with a 7 to 9 months lag, although I'm told that it may be shortened to 4 to 6 months. Since the synthetic, the model-based monthly estimator for our mixed model are very close to the benchmark estimates, I actually may use them to get real-time estimates when current ACS data are still not available. In other words, instead of using the handbook or using the laws, I can just actually use my model to get my estimates. And as you saw, it will give me, at the end of the day, estimates that are very, very close when I add them up to the true or the model-based total, ACS total. So it's not that we are sort of chasing our tail. I start with a model for the total, and now I sort of have a same for each month, and now I get the correct results. I use this model, but actually I can compare it to the real ACS total, and as I said, I get a very, very good fit when I add them up. And they also satisfy this CPS data. What about those 5 years data? As I say, this is something we still need to work on. And the main issue is that whereas annual ACS sampling errors are independent over time, those 5 year sampling errors are by definition highly correlated, because when you do 2 successive 5 years totals, they have 4 years in common. Now, sampling error variances for 5 period estimates are available, so we have the variances for those 5 years total, but we still don't have estimates for those, for the auto covariances. Now, it should be not too difficult to work them out, but this is something that we should do. What we did already is actually fit a similar model to what we did for the annual estimates, just to fit a similar model to the 5 years estimates, ignoring those autocorrelations, and we actually get nice results. But as I say, this model is wrong in a way. So, what is our next steps? As I say, there are still a lot to do. Fit a state space model to those 5 year ACS estimates, which will allow to predict the annual estimates. And then, once I have predictions for my annual estimates, now I can proceed as I do with those 1-year estimates. We actually have the equations already. We just need to program it and obviously see and study how it works. Another issue which I also mentioned is to estimate the variances of the benchmark small area estimates. Now I emphasized before that if we use this quadratic distance function, then we get actually explicit expressions for what our estimates are. If it wasn't before the Denton method, to compute the variance would actually be straightforward because we have the variances of all those components, so using Taylor method or whatever, you can compute the variance. The Denton method makes actually everything more complicated, but obviously, as in we're not supposed just to provide estimates in those small areas, but also the variances, so some criteria of how reliable they are. I think that's it. Here are all those references that I mentioned, so thank you very much.
So thank you, Danny, and we're going to take some questions now from the audience here at BLS first. And if you could come up to one of these microphones, I'm going to turn them on. And then after that, we'll try to take some questions.